Good evening. This is Maestro Cortello with a Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite Modcast. Today we have a 2v2 on Calderis Refinery. Our first player right here is Chaos Librarian, playing as Sindri, Trollface, Chaos Sorcerer. We got some Thousand Suns right here. The Chaos Sorcerer is a spell-casting hero. Starts out with Doom Bolts, a spell with incredible range. You can also teleport with an easy upgrade, and has some crazy spells later on that can make units explode or mind control them, snare them in place, etc. Chaos Librarian's teammate is Dark Riku, playing as the Lord General, because I'm in command, that's why. The Lord General is the only hero who is a squad. He starts off as a ranged hero, but he's actually very good at melee as well. Well, not very good, but you can use him as a melee tie-up pretty effectively. Has a huge amount of staying power with the retinue. Costly staying power, but staying power nonetheless. He focuses on buffing and supporting. He starts out with no abilities, but every single one of his warriors gives him an ability. On the other side of things, we have Loth, X-Ray Dog, playing as the Warp Spider Exarch. The Warp Spider Exarch is a teleporting harassment hero. Starts out mainly fighting in range, but he is also a hero who can do pretty well in melee too, especially if you get the heavy blades upgrade or power blades. And finally, we have Fear, playing as the tunneling Ravener Alpha. The Ravener Alpha is a primarily ranged hero, but also, yet again, can function reasonably well in melee. He creates tunnels that work much like webway gates, giving a lot of mobility to Tyranids. So some interesting things, matchups we see here. We see Chaos Librarian playing his trademark Sorcerer. Chaos Librarian, pretty much probably the most iconic Sorcerer player around right now, both for being a very, very good player, as well as being the most creative, probably the most creative and stylish Sorcerer player. Since there are other people who play the Sorcerer, such as myself, such as Ace of Swords, and such as Tex, who play the Sorcerer, but definitely don't quite leave the impression that Chaos Librarian Sorcerer leaves. And of course we have Dark Riku, one of the best players in the game, here playing as the Lord General. Lord General, I think, is a very powerful hero in many, many ways. And now let's see, on the other side we have X-Ray Dog, possibly not as well, definitely not as well known or renowned as Chaos Librarian or Dark Riku, but frequently featured in high-level replays and casts, and he is a good player who also has a lot of versatility. X-Ray Dog often plays random, and he often does quite well. I wouldn't be surprised if he got the Sorcerer purely on random, and it is always very tough to play random against players who are very, very good. And I know personally, whenever I'm playing people who are very, very good, not only do I not go random, I pretty much just go straight to my main hero, just because I expect not to be able to perform as well using many of my secondary heroes. And Fear is someone who, again, not quite as well known as someone like Dark Riku, but good player, mainly focuses on Tyranids and Imperial Guard. And Fear is someone who has some very interesting strategies, particularly his triple Sentinel build with Imperial Guard. He's also done some very interesting things with the Tyranids as well, particularly some very oppressive Hive Tyrant play using Brood Nest. Now this Hormigaunt squad could be the Hormigaunt Brood could be quite a bit of trouble. Chaos Librarian goes for the follow-up. He might lose the Sorcerer in the process, taking hits from and he does lose the Sorcerer in the process. Now that was a little unfortunate. He did get a sync kill there, pinning his Sorcerer in place at a time when he was getting swarmed by basically both armies. Although he was already being very, very risky, teleporting forward, trying to go for retreat kills at a time where he probably wasn't going to wipe that entire squad. It was very close, and it was a close call, but ultimately I think the risk there was not quite worth it. Or at the very least, it certainly didn't end up working out in Chaos Librarian's favor. Now we have two armies pushing. Now, if we look at the builds that these players have, Fear is in a lane against the Imperial Guard, so we got that Barbed Strangler, which is very, very good against the Imperial Guard. It's basically a grenade launcher area of effect weapon that suppresses all Imperial Guard squads, pretty much just very vulnerable to any kind of, pretty much any kind of area of effect weapon. So that Barbed Strangler is the early area of effect choice that you get out of the Warrior Root. It does, of course, also suppress. With most races, against most other races, that Barbed Strangler usually is either not worth it or is just very situational. Because it usually, against things like Tax and CSM, it usually doesn't really do enough damage. And it also, you're often not really getting, it's also often swarmed by melee units, or it will lose quite handily. It can do very, very well, do some very good damage against the Heretics as long as it can land some shots. And right now it is landing some shots because there was, I think, a combination of the Crippling Poison and then that Barbed Strangler shot. Riku being very, very brazen with his Sentinel. I don't know if he's going to get this out alive. He's in a lot of trouble right now. He's about to lose an entire Guardman squad. And to be honest, he's probably going to lose that Sentinel as well. And yes, he does. Ouch. So he was going for an aggressive stomp, and normally that stomp is used defensively against melee units, and that's generally the best way. That's generally the best way to use it. Now, that being said, both Tyranid players have gone for extremely ranged-heavy builds, opting not to get, pretty much opting not to get Howling Banshees or X-Ray Dog. And he's already got the Warp Spider Exarch, who is the only, really the only hero, the only Eldar hero who starts out as a ranged hero, although I think the Warlock can do some decent range damage with some of his weapon upgrades. And there's also the fact that he's got the the regular Warp Spider squad, so there's a massive amount of range damage coming out of X-Ray Dog. Not to mention he's got the improved targeters, increasing the range of his Warp Spider Exarch, as well as improving their damage by 50%. And Riku is bleeding and getting killed horribly. I just saw with the way he was getting doubled, those grenades coming in, that he was going to lose both that he was going to lose that Sentinel as well as that Guardsman squad. So that was a huge early play. Riku's suffering quite a bit. Chaos Librarian has been focusing a bit more on map control and hasn't really been supporting as much. Now this is going to be very challenging as well. X-Ray Dog has gone for double Warp Spiders, which is probably a powerful build against probably against any race, but particularly good against the Imperial Guard. Those Guardsmen are just going to get shredded very, very quickly. And to be honest, right now, Chaos Librarian is not really equipped to deal with these Warp Spiders either. Since Chaos Librarian, he's got the Heretics, which are going to bleed horribly to the Warp Spiders while being almost powerless to do anything against them. We do have a squad of Chaos Space Marines. The Chaos Space Marines, when fully upgraded to the Mark of Tzeentch, and also having Eternal War and an Aspiring Champion, the Mark of Tzeentch Chaos Space Marines actually do outright counter Warp Spiders. But in this case, we have Chaos Space Marines that were not upgraded. They're only getting the upgrade right now, and Chaos Librarian is probably doing that almost out of necessity. So it's now a triple cap for the blue team, but they have lost a lot of their power. Now, I haven't seen much of the things on this side. Haven't seen much of Chaos Librarian, to be honest. I don't know. It doesn't look like he's returned any of the power bashes. And it actually looks like, I don't know, somehow the blue team at least seems to be doing okay in terms of keeping up in tech. Although that could be just because the red team has already invested more in actual Tier 3 purchases. I mean, X-Ray Dog with double Warp Spiders, both of them getting upgraded. They both have both their Exarch as well as the Aspect right now, giving them that Haywire grenade. And that Haywire will at least keep that Chimera just like stalled out and dead in the water. Right now, X-Ray Dog does not actually have much that he can follow up that Haywire with. and he's mainly actually going to be relying on Fear to sort of team up with him to go after it with his Ravener Alpha as well as his Venom Brood. Now, it's very interesting that one of the relative weaknesses of Tyranids is sort of their AV, and specifically they're relying entirely on a Zoanthrope for a snare, which is probably a less convenient source of a snare than something like Warp Spiders, which are just such a great general-purpose unit to get in any matchup. And, I mean, the Zoanthrope is certainly very good and would be especially good against Imperial Guard, would do very well against Heretics as well, so it would not be a bad choice for Fear to get a Zoanthrope, and that must be why he's getting one. Otherwise, X-Ray Dog and Fear would really have to work together to take out that Chimera, combining X-Ray Dog's snares from those Warp Spiders with the Venom Brood's anti-vehicle damage, as well as the anti-vehicle damage of this Ravener with the Corrosive Devour. It gives him a plasma weapon, which would be very good against heavily armored units. There aren't that many, just this single squad of Tzeentch Space Marines, which has been fully upgraded. So, I mean, that kind of shows to me that Chaos Librarian knows his stuff, and it's not terribly surprising. Warp Spiders are a ridiculously good ranged unit just in terms of how much damage they do, and they will straight up win most ranged fights. And there are units like Tactical Marines, which have heavy armor and are very tanky, but definitely don't put out the kind of ranged DPS that Tzeentch Space Marines put out. So these Tzeentch Space Marines will be putting out damage that is comparable to the Warp Spiders, slightly less actually, while having the resistance of heavy infantry armor, as well as having just a bigger health pool. That being said, it's still not quite in Chaos Librarian's favor, given the fact that he's only got one squad of Tzeentch Space Marines, while there are these double Warp Spiders. And those Warp Spiders will lose their models very quickly, but at this point, to be honest, so will these Tzeentch Space Marines, especially with the entire red team about to converge on them. And, I mean, I think Chaos Librarian just realized that fight probably could be really bad for him, could lose Tzeentch Space Marine models prematurely and then have to force them off. And that's probably, I mean, the Tzeentch Space Marines are really the only thing that can really keep those Warp Spiders in check. The only answer, pretty much, that he has. To some extent, this Dreadnought, except for the fact that the Dreadnought can get snared. And not only snared, but have its weapons disabled. Now the Blood Crusher gets double snared. One of the things that... so we have Creeping Barrages. One of the things that I think the blue team is doing is actually that they're actually almost soft countering the Warp Spiders and their Haywire Grenades by getting too many vehicles. And especially because X-Ray Dog's build is very lopsided. It is not a balanced composition. He's got just overwhelming range DPS, absolutely overwhelming, and it's like absolutely ridiculous. He is certainly lacking melee. He is also lacking hard AV, or even not just hard AV, but actual passive AV that does not require an ability that will be on cooldown. Because I mean, X-Ray Dog, he can pretty much kill any kind of infantry. He can stall out a vehicle, but he can't kill it. So he's mainly going to be relying on Fear to actually kill a vehicle. Now, unfortunately, this is not great positioning from these Tzeentch Space Marines. They are losing models. Luckily, at least for Chaos Librarian, those Warp Spiders pretty much teleported right into the Blood Crusher. The Blood Crusher, unfortunately, goes down, cannot get infiltrated fast enough. Unfortunately, it looks like still too many things here. And this might also be a dead Chaos Dreadnought. He does warp it to his Sorcerer using the Warp Global, but the Sorcerer was not far back enough. And there's a dead Chaos Dreadnought, so big losses for Chaos Librarian, losing both of his vehicles in that play, and his infantry, to be honest, in a lot of trouble too. Luckily, Riku is answering with that Manticore. Oh my god, that Manticore is really just such a great asset that the Imperial Guard has. I've said before that to be honest, I think it's better than some Tier 3 nukes. It's certainly very powerful. It has squad wiping power. You can wipe some squads from it, particularly heretics, although I doubt Riku will be targeting his teammates' heretics. That being said, we still have some Termagants right here. The Termagants will be very, very vulnerable to the Manticore. So will the Venom Brood, to be honest. I mean, just about any squad is going to be very, very vulnerable to the Manticore. Now, this is X-Ray Dog being very aggressive, going for that Manticore. I don't think he's going to get it. But, I mean, just the pressure that he's exerting right now by going in and force meleeing a Manticore with the Warp Spider squad. And they could, if Riku didn't react there, he actually could have lost his Manticore just because of how fragile the Manticore is. Oh my god, we just have a completely dead Guardsman squad, I guess from this Doom of Malantai. We have a Sorcerer level 4, as well as a Lord General only level 2, and he only has the Stabilizer's ability, which is an ability that is very good. Some people even say that in teams it can be overpowered. It heals infantry over time, and it can particularly be very good because of the fact that it actually heals allied units as well. So if your teammate has a massive range blob as well, you just have a combination of two massive range blobs doing really ridiculous things. These Chaos Space Marines now in a lot of trouble. They're getting hit by so many... Just losing models, walking right back into that paroxysm, but it does finally end. Now, things are not really looking that great for Riku and Chaos Librarian. They have a big VP lead, but they have really not been doing very well on the fighting end of things. Now, I am very, very surprised to see X-Ray Dog go for that Autarch. His build is still just not a very balanced composition because, again, he just doesn't have much he can do. X-Ray Dog cannot personally really deal with a vehicle. He just doesn't have a unit that can actually reliably do AV damage. Looks like Chaos Librarian lost a Heretic squad somewhere. Just going for another Dreadnought. Here we have a Baneblade out from Dark Riku. So both these blue team players lost a lot of things, but they made it to tier 3. And I mean, Riku already has a big tier 3 purchase. He's got that Baneblade, which really can be a game-changing unit, as it should be as a super unit. But particularly even as a super unit, it seems to be really, really good. In part because unlike, say, the Land Raider Crusader and the Land Raider Redeemer, it's really an anti-all unit. It's very good against infantry, it's very good against other tanks. It can disrupt and do damage to blobs with the Demolisher Cannon. It's also very durable, and Imperial Guard generally already has a lot of repair support between guardsmen, repair bunkers. So this Baneblade, especially compared to, I mean, obviously the two of the Land Raiders, the Crusader and the Redeemer, don't really have much in terms of anti-vehicle capability, whereas that Phobos from Chaos is just not, is much less tanky, much less durable, just can't really hold the way that a Baneblade can. So it looks like we had a play there for that Manticore, and the Manticore is just straight up gone, and I'm not too surprised. Now with a Warp Spider that has Power Blades, giving him some heavy melee damage. And I mean, certainly with the other Warp Spider squads in there with their power melee. Oh, this could be a little bad, though. So one Warp Spider squad does get pretty close to getting wiped, but ultimately still worth it to take out that Manticore. That Manticore can be so oppressive. And X-Ray Dog really did what he needed. He even used... It says he has the improved warp generator, grants him the group teleport ability, and I'm guessing he used that to get all of his units behind that Manticore. And from there, as long as if he haywires the Manticore and then just follows it up with some melee, there just really wasn't much Riku was going to be able to do about that Manticore. Or about his Manticore. Now, strangely, despite a lot of the early dominance from Fear and X-Ray Dog. They are really struggling a bit right here. They're struggling with some of the super units that are now coming out of the blue team, particularly that Baneblade that was mentioned, as well as now these Chaos Terminators. Oh, this is going to be very nice. Very nice. So, Chaos Librarian uses Sigil of the Rift to warp out those Terminators, make sure he gets them out of there alive, and actually still has all 3 models. So, those Chaos Terminators are going to be off the field a little bit because they're going to take some time to heal. But, I mean, at least the good side of that is that Chaos Librarian did not bleed at all at a time where he did kind of overextend his Terminators. And that Sigil of the Rift is just another way. The Sigil of the Rift is such a great war gear in terms of just the amount of room it gives you for creativity. It's one of the most interesting war gears in the game that really just allows you to be creative and do some very interesting things with it. So one of the new ways you can use it in the Elite mod is, well, technically you could do this even outside of Elite mod, but you can use it to save your Terminators just in a situation where they might otherwise be screwed. Much like you would use the Gate of Infinity ability from the Librarian, which I'm not even sure that everybody knows about that, but that's just a teleporting ability where you can teleport Loyalist Terminators out of danger as long as you have a Librarian on the field with that war gear, with the Psychic Code war gear. Now in this case, Chaos Librarian has the Sigil of the Rift on a Sorcerer, and he can really use that very much to the same effect. He can teleport his Terminators out of there, which is very helpful considering the Terminators cannot retreat. Oh, and the Baneblade goes down. Wow, I thought it just might be able to tank all that, the fire. I thought it just might be able to tank just that Ravener Alpha shooting at it with the repairs it was getting. And now Chaos Librarian's about to lose his Terminators as well. 1 health. And they're going down right there. They actually got a sync kill. So it's still a massive VP lead for the blue team, but they have nothing. Now, and it still is very interesting to see X-Ray Dog with his, again, lopsided, not unbalanced composition, where he just has a massive anti-infantry capabilities and very few anti-vehicle capabilities, and he would have enough population to put down something like a Guardian weapon team that could have a Bright Lance. I don't know if he wants to commit to that, but X-Ray Dog might also be having trouble keeping up with reinforcement costs. Oh, that was terrible. Oh no. So there is a Sigil of the Rift right there. Some heretics were teleported into the middle of a blob, and then the Manticore strike actually took out, well, not took out, but it did a lot of damage to those heretics. And I mean, now we actually see right here that only X-Ray Dog is on the field. He snared, oh, and there we go, the Autarch flying through the air as a corpse. X-Ray Dog snared the Chaos Dreadnought, and then he actually couldn't do anything about it because he doesn't have any actual follow-up AV. So he was just shooting at it with his Warp Spiders, and the Warp Spiders can't do anything to a vehicle. I think the Rangers might be dead right here. No, the Chaos Dreadnought is not targeting them. If that Chaos Dreadnought went after those Rangers, those would be some dead Rangers. Now we have a Leman Russ out on the field for Dark Riku. Immediately upgrades to the Elite Tank Crew. That's that unique upgrade in the Elite mod. And wow, the Lord General goes down there trying to cap in the middle of that Paroxysm. Chaos Librarian is keeping his Dreadnought alive thanks to that Warp Global. Now that Leman Russ right here, right now Riku is keeping it as the default battle cannon, which is not a bad choice. I've recently learned a few things about that Leman Russ. The Vanquisher Cannon upgrade on that Leman Russ really is an anti-vehicle specialization. Does not really have that great accuracy against infantry. It can hit them occasionally, but the main battle cannon is really much more reliable. What is this? We have like some kind of bug here. I think that's probably a commissar on the Lord General retinue. It can't be a commissar on the Lord General retinue, can it? Yes, it can be. So the commissar was alive while the Lord General was still on the floor. I wonder if that was a bug or just some kind of coincidence of factors. So basically just the Leman Russ with this battle cannon. It's just very versatile as being both anti-infantry and anti-vehicle in its default battle cannon form, whereas getting either one of its upgrades really does give you a specialization. You're either giving yourself an infantry specialization or a vehicle specialization. Now, one of the interesting things that X-Ray Dog actually stole the bunker, so that's actually preventing Riku's Leman Russ from actually getting any repairs. And Riku can't even take the bunker back yet because the Warp Spider Exarch is still in. The Warp Spider Exarch gets shot out of the building, so Riku will get his bunker back. But I don't know if they're going to get the field back. Maybe he won't even get his bunker back. But now we have a rocket run. And unfortunately, I don't think much actually died from the rocket run. I mean, certainly some squad members died, but I don't think any squads were wiped from that rocket run. Now, that rocket run it's a little tricky. It's something that is both very powerful, and at the same time, in some ways, it can also be underwhelming. The main thing is that it's not really good. Certainly, it's not very good at all against vehicles. It can do damage, but really not enough. It's also not that great against more heavily armored squads like Terminators. Even I'd say like Chaos Space Marines and Tactical Marines are not really a great use of the Rocket Run. The Rocket Run is mainly really good against those infantry units. The Catachan Devils, anything from the Imperial Guard, most Orc units, probably most Eldar units as well, but the Orc units are a little more resilient to it because they have those really tough Knob Leaders that have something like almost 300 health, even when the individual members only have about 100. And then the Eldar squads as well are actually, the individual squad members are very vulnerable to that rocket run, but the squad leaders are very resistant to it and will usually survive the rocket run. In this case, we also have level 4 squads out of X-Ray Dog, level 4, 2 squads of level 4 Dire Avengers, level 3 Rangers, and 2 level 3 Warp Spider squads. So we really got some ridiculous DPS coming out of X-Ray Dog. Fear himself, he's got some leveled squads as well, and he's got those double Carnifexes. He's got double Venom Cannon Carnifexers, which I actually think is a little surprising to see. There is an Eldritch Storm. That's going to be the end of that Predator. To be honest, probably the end of this Chaos Dreadnought. I think the Venom Cannon Carnifexes should actually go for the Chaos Dreadnought and not... Oh, but they can't go for the Chaos Dreadnought because the Chaos Dreadnought was teleported out of there. But those Venom Cannon Carnifexes, I felt they had a better chance of killing that Dreadnought than these Leman Russes. Since the Leman Russes are going to back off, they'll get repairs. They also have the support of this Las Cannon. Additionally, the Venom Cannon Carnifex, I believe right now they cannot fire on the move. And that is something that does really limit their abilities as a ranged AV unit, especially against other ranged AV units like these tanks. Since the tanks can often just weave in and out, it can make it very difficult for the Carnifexes to get a shot off. Here we see a Manticore Strike. I think the Manticore Strike is going up top, and it might even wipe this Ranger squad. The level 3 Ranger squad, it does get out of there with with 2 models left. And the melee, the Corncast Dreadnought from the Chaos Librarian is level 4. This squad of Tzeentch-cast Space Marines, I'm wondering if this is like a new squad of Tzeentch-cast Space Marines and he lost his original one. Because I would think, if he had a squad of Tzeentch-cast Space Marines, that they would be higher than level 1. Now, they may just be in a tough situation where they may be having to deal with 2 Warp Spider squads, and they may just not be winning against 2 Warp Spider squads. 1 squad of Zinchcast Space Marines definitely counters 1 squad of Warp Spiders, but a second fully upgraded Warp Spider squad definitely changes things a bit, especially when both Warp Spiders are level 3. So this could be very bad for the Russ. Both Leman Russes have been haywired, and we see the Venom Cannon Carnifex is closing in. Might take out the Leman Russ that is fairly low on health, but it is getting repairs. And the Paroxysm nearly killed that heavy weapon team, forced it off. Okay, 1 Imperial Guard Leman Russ is down, but I think, yes, we also have a Venom Cannon Carnifex down. And I think the other Venom Cannon Carnifex is as well. So, I mean, those... I'm not really a... I don't play Tyranids pretty much. But right now, those Venom Cannon Carnifexes, at least to me, they don't really seem that good. They do not fire on the move. I don't know... I don't think their attack power is necessarily that much better, or... if it is any better than a Leman Russ. But I mean, just the advantage that something like this Leman Russ has is the mobility. If the fight is not going in the direction of the Leman Russ, if it looks like the Leman Russ is going to lose, it can get out of there. It can just run away because of its mobility. Whereas that Venom Cannon Carnifex is if the Venom Cannon Carnifex is, if the fight's not going in its way and it tries to run out of there, it's something like the Leman Russ can just chase. Double Warp Spiders. Now, I mean, one of the things I've noticed about X-Ray Dog... Oh, he just lost a lot of Warp Spiders. X-Ray Dog, he really hasn't made much in terms of Tier 3 purchases. He does have this D-Cannon, but he doesn't have anything like... He doesn't have anything like an Avatar or even a Fire Prism. And they're actually saying something in the chat that makes a lot of sense. Fear is asking if X-Ray Dog is... getting, like, if you can get an Avatar, but I was actually just going to point out that with the reinforcements cost that he has on those Warp Spiders, the Dire Avengers, and the Rangers, it's just, X-Ray Dog is having a lot of trouble with his economy, where he probably can't afford, where he probably just can't afford an Avatar. I mean, if we look at X-Ray Dog's resources, he's got almost 1,000 power, but just not enough requisition. And that's definitely one of the downsides to going with the kind of build that X-Ray Dog has gone for. Both, I mean, besides the fact that it's just so lopsided and unbalanced in its composition, and it does not really give you what you need to deal with every kind of threat imaginable. But also just the reinforcement cost. And that's actually one of the reasons why you get vehicles in this game, because vehicles are an upfront purchase. They don't have the ongoing maintenance costs of an infantry unit that needs to reinforce. The infantry units, they need to reinforce, and as a consequence of needing to reinforce, they are costing you every engagement. As long as you, whenever you lose models, they are going to cost you. Vehicles, on the other hand, as long as you keep a vehicle alive, you're pretty much only paying that upfront cost of buying the vehicle in the first place. Now, I guess technically you could argue that you could be losing resources from whatever units you're trying to use to repair the vehicle as well as just support the vehicle. But the vehicle itself is an upfront purchase. You pay for it upfront. You pay that, in the case of the Leman Russ, 500 requisition and 125 power. But you don't really pay for the repairs. Whereas for a squad, you're paying to reinforce. And I mean, X-Ray Dog is just hurting on reinforcements. He's hurting in reinforcements so much, he is having trouble actually reinforcing his squads. And we actually have a double Zinchcast Space Marines out of Chaos Librarian, but he's having a lot of trouble making it work, to be honest. He's losing, I mean, Chaos Librarian is himself bleeding a lot. And I mean, part of him, I think he thinks he may need it, and in a way he kind of does, since Chaos Space Marines just are one of the main answers to Warp Spiders. They will actually counter Warp Spiders. Now, it's still tough with Chaos Librarian having his Zinchcast Space Marines at level 1 or even level 2, whereas both of the Warp Spiders are at level 4 doing absolutely ridiculous damage. Additionally, X-Ray Dog has a bigger army overall, so he has more support. He can win a fight with his Warp Spiders against the Tzeentch-cast Space Marines by using the Kinetic Pulse on his Rangers, knocking down the Tzeentch-cast Space Marines, and then they're just taking damage while not doing any. So double cap for the red team. They've only got 53 VPs left, but they're doing a lot to even it out. X-Ray Dog has had a lot of squad preservation, but he's obviously still bleeding too much from them, and that's just one of the reasons why a build like this from Eldar is very difficult to use because of, again, how lopsided it is, because of how much it's going to cost to reinforce those units, and because of how much that's going to limit you when it comes to playing that late tier 3 game and even getting late game units. Now, Riku has gotten these Leman Russes, and the Leman Russ is a great tank. I've actually grown very, very fond of it as I've started to... And we actually just saw exactly what I was talking about, which is that the Tzeentch-cast Space Marines are fighting the Warp Spiders, and the Tzeentch-cast Space Marines got knocked down by the Rangers using their Kinetic Pulse. And we might actually... Oh, and one of the Tzeentch-cast Space Marines goes down. So unfortunately, those fights are not really going that well. And he's going to lose yet another Tzeentch-cast Space Marine squad, and he does! And he's going to lose the Heretics as well. I think he will. So Chaos Librarian just lost every single one of his units, only has the Sorcerer. Now for X-Ray Dog, it might actually not hurt him that much to lose one of his squads entirely. I mean, he would be losing a level 4 squad. He's got level 4 on his Dire Avengers, his Rangers, and both of his Warp Spiders. He also had level 4 on the Dire Avenger squad that he lost. But, if he actually loses one of his squads, that could free up some of his upkeep, as well as freeing up some of his reinforcement costs, and then he might actually be able to put something like an Avatar on the field, a Fire Prism, or just whatever else. I mean, at this point, just the fact that he has things on the field is great compared to what Chaos Librarian has on the field. Chaos Librarian gets a new Dreadnought, and of course, when you're getting a new Dreadnought, that follow-up purchase of the Heretics is not a surprise at all. If you're going to get a vehicle, you really need to have those repair units around as well, or you're not going to get the most use out of your vehicle. Or, you're just not really going to get a good use out of your vehicle overall, since you don't want to just not repair a vehicle. So VP is now getting much, much closer. Only 100 left for the blue team, and they've just suffered so many losses. Riku, I don't remember how many tanks that he's lost. Riku can actually get a new Bane Blade, and that's exactly what he's doing. Chaos Librarian, on the other hand, cannot do a whole lot. Now, one of the things Chaos... Oh, here's a Rocket Run. That is very nice. And I think that Rocket Run might take out a few units. Took out 2 squads right there. 2 of Fierce squads. Took out, I believe, a Venom Brood squad, which is a very nice squad to take out, given that, just in terms of really limiting the AV that the red team can put on the field, because the blue team is continuing to make vehicles. And they're relying at this point, they're going to be relying pretty much entirely on the Carnifexes as anti-vehicle. And those Carnifexes, I've kind of said what I think about them as anti-vehicle. Definitely not that great. Certainly not as good as a regular tank. To be honest, even the Chaos Dreadnought is probably going to be better anti-vehicle than these Carnifexes. That Chaos Dreadnought, I believe, does more damage. It can fire on the move. And right now it has full health. I actually think Chaos Librarian should have actually pursued there a bit with his Dreadnought. Probably could have taken out at least one Carnifex, if not both of them, to be honest. And with his Sorcerer already in retreat, he would have his Sorcerer basically just ready to use that Warp Global on the Chaos Dreadnought if it actually did get overextended and things were not going well for it. We have an Autarch right here, trying to go for this Manticore. Unfortunately, with the Autarch's default sword, that is just not going to work against a Manticore that's getting repairs. I mean, the Autarch maybe with the fusion gun or even the Executioner Spear could maybe do that to a Manticore, especially if it weren't getting repairs, but when it's getting repairs and you only have that default power sword on the Autarch, she just does not do enough damage with that default power sword. Her default power sword is pretty comparable in damage to the default melee damage for a melee hero like the Warlock or the Force Commander. So 1-to-1 cap. VPs are roughly even. Dark Riku now with his double tank play, and this is actually, I mean, this is going to be tough. I think Chaos Librarian and Dark Riku are in a pretty good position now with these tanks, and mainly relying on Dark Riku at this point. And this D cannon has like 9 health. Yeah, I was waiting for that Baneblade to take it out. Now the only thing is now a double cap against the blue team, so I don't know if they need to at least, well, they're running out of time. I don't know if they're going to be able to get it because they're not even getting the middle. This could be a game for them. They need to at least get a decap on one of the side VPs. Chaos Librarian needs to start that decap now. And I think he may be able to just barely stop the counter. I feel like these Terminators are decapping very, very slowly. But they do manage to get it off. Stopped it at 7 VPs for the blue team. And now these Carnifexes, I mean, these Venom Cannon Carnifexes, they are about to catch some of these units a little isolated, particularly that Chaos Dreadnought away. Actually, no, just kidding. The Venom Cannon Carnifex is coming back into the middle. Unfortunately, those Venom Cannon Carnifexes, I really just don't think are really going to win against all of the vehicles that the blue team has. And now we also have an autocannon on that on those Terminators, and I think, yeah, this Carnifex has got to be done. Although the game just might end first. But even as I'm speaking, we have some decaps happening. Decaps, I don't think they're going to go fast enough. And here's an Imperial Abyss. And that is it. Quite a crazy game at the end, and what a way to finish it with that Imperial Abyss on those Warp Spiders. Those Warp Spiders, I mean, as unbalanced as X-Ray Dog's composition was, it did do some pretty nasty things. Amazing for Chaos Librarian and Dark Riku to pull through in the end. They had that VP lead, then they were losing it because they just didn't have much to fight with, but they somehow just managed to pull through in the end. Quite a game. Hope you enjoyed the cast. Have a good night.